Industrial birth and British worth. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdellamy, DMA. We are Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is January the 6th, 2021. And on this date in history, in, 75 minus 2021. In 1946, my Uncle Kenny was born. So Uncle Kenny is 75 today. So happy birthday, Uncle Kenny.
Shh. Sounds like fishing. I don't know.
So now we get a chance to go into one of the most important events in the history of personkind, and that's the Industrial Revolution. In the world that existed before this, everything was really made by hand and one at a time. There's no consistency among products, much more of a crapshoot, and 95% of the world's population were employed as farmers. Okay? So this revolution actually is a chance to try and get rid of all the scarcity of the old regime and making things more affordable for people in life. Okay? So that instead of you just working to maintain food, you might be able to afford items for the first time. This is using mineral and mechanical engineering for energy for animal and human energy. So, sometimes you'd have machines run by rivers, by wind, by heat, instead of just by people and by animals. Okay, and people started producing more per capita. That means more per person. And the more that is produced, the more product that is out there, and that actually will lower the unit cost. So, England has several different advantages that makes it easier for them to be a leader in the Industrial Revolution. And this starts off with the geography. Okay, the very fact that they are a landed empire, they have no major threats that are really close. Anyone who comes over to invade is going to have to do it by the water. And England has one of the most powerful navies in the world, and really does between 1588 and about 1934. And even after 1934, you're talking about still one of the 4 or 5 strongest navies in the world, even to today. Okay. They never really needed a large standing army because, again, no natural enemies, except across the water. They had a large number of natural resources, and coal and iron ore were among them. So they have a larger population, again, because not a lot of natural enemies close by. And they had a mobile labor force through all the rivers and canals and the railroad, so they could staff new factories. Okay, they have strong financial institutions, bank and credit institutions. They actually separated the wealth of the monarchy from, or not the wealth, but the wealth of the nation from the monarch at an earlier time than the rest of Europe. Okay, and in creating these new credit institutions and banks, there was plenty of money to start new businesses. So many different advantages. Okay, so the Political Enclosure Acts. This promotes commercial agriculture. Okay, so basically what happens is all of the public land is kind of taken over and run by corporations. Okay, laissez-faire policies protect property rights. Okay, so the government won't interfere, but it will protect property. Okay, something that the United States has as well. These groups supported acquiring colonies and developing the British Navy. Okay, and this also creates markets for British products and more sources for raw materials. So as Britain's going out and colonizing the rest of the world and moving to the rest of the world, they're getting access to more raw materials, and not only that, they're getting new places to sell all of their products. Okay, agricultural revolution. This changed stock breeding. This made much more efficient farming, and a lot more people were fed at much lower prices. Again, nothing but advantages. Okay, now let's look at some of the social advantages that England's going to have over the other countries. Okay, so the aristocrats are going to look down on the bourgeoisie who are making profit. So all of these wealthy people are going to, look down on people that are just trying to make more money. Aristocrats are going to have money for a long time without having to intermarry with these members of the bourgeoisie because of all the land that they own, and most of the time they spend just managing the properties that their families have owned for hundreds or thousands of years. Hundreds is probably more accurate, though. Okay, the aristocrats and the middle class did work together, though. Okay, so there was a lot of religious toleration that went on in England at this time to promote a stronger economy. Okay, and if you were any type of problem, they would send you to go and work in these factories, and you basically were forgotten. Okay, inventors and inventions came from practical and technical training. Population is going to grow in England during this time from 10 to 30 million people. Okay, and the migrants and landless were driven to cities where they could go and work in industrial jobs. So factory jobs for everyone. Now, because of people like Adam Smith and Thomas Malthus, basically Thomas Malthus says that the food supply cannot keep up with the natural population growth, and that there was a limit to the amount of people that could be on Earth at any one point, just limited to the amount of food. Okay, so he had an essay on human population that that he used to help promote his theory. But the agricultural revolution is going to prove him wrong. Okay, so the very fact that they can produce enough food to sustain this much larger population, because generally in history what had happened is there would be major problems with famine, there'd be major problems with disease and wars, and those were the type of things that limited population from growing to where it is today. Okay. David Ricardo writes what's called the law, or the iron law of wages. Okay, basically, if the poor gain higher wages, they'll produce more children, and this increases the labor supply and drives down incomes. So basically, there's no such thing as a higher standard of living. Although, if you looked in the United States today, you would find something that goes against all of that. So. In the 1950s, the United States had a standard of living that was never believed possible. So, rules are made to be broken. Textile Innovations. So the flying shuttle, that's on the left-hand side there. Okay, this is created by John Kay, and this lets one loom operator work with a wider cloth, and the shuttle could be operated by one hand. And you would feed the thread through all the way through, and then you would move the loom and then do the next row. And so it made the production of cloth much quicker and much more efficient. Okay, the spinning jenny. Okay, that's created by James Hargreaves. That's him on the right hand side, not the left hand side. Left hand side, that's John Kay, who looks like the 6-year-old. Okay, and down at the very bottom on the left-hand side, there's a large flying shuttle. On the right-hand side, you can see the spinning jenny that was created by James Hargreaves. And this lets operators spin 8 or more threads with additional spindles, making thread at a much faster rate. Now on the left-hand side, you see what's called the water frame. This is created by Richard Arkwright. Okay, and this adds water power to the jenny, which leads to factories near rivers. So you no longer had to have the animals to move the machines, or people to use the machines. You would use water to help turn the machines, and that's how the first factory in the United States was created, using river power. Okay, the mule. This is created by Samuel Crompton on the right hand side, And this combines the mechanical principles of the jenny and the water frame to create the spinning mule, okay, which is going to produce things at an even faster rate. A lot of these innovations were in textiles, which is something used all over the world, and finer cloth could be created at a much faster rate using all the innovations that they were doing at the time in, well, in the textile industry. Okay, the power loom. So, this is created by Edmund Cartwright, okay, and this really becomes cost effective in the 1830s, and it drove the hand loom weavers out of business. As you can see there, you have a much larger loom than what they were using before, okay. The effects, this created a large demand for raw cotton, and the need for extra cotton meant that you had to have a lot more people planting it, and this is going to reinvigorate slavery in the United States, who was the largest producer of cotton at the time. Okay, so there were about 2,400 power looms in 1813. So that's even before it becomes really cost effective. And by 1850, you have 260,000. So they had a large need for cotton. They had a large need for for workers and for machines. So they produced a lot of cloth, and I mean a lot. Okay, so James Watt, he perfects the steam engine by employing a condenser to cool the steam and rotary motion. This would later power factories and some of the first trains. Okay, and so just the power of the heat would cause the motor to turn. Okay, iron smelting, not spelting. That's whenever you spelt something in the past. Iron smelting, though, this includes charcoal or fuel from burning wood, and this is going to deplete English forests. Okay, so they had to come up with a new way to do this that didn't get rid of all the forest of England. Okay, and Abraham Darby, okay, he's the guy who does this. He's a Quaker, and he's a blast furnace to create coke. That's a coal byproduct, and this heats iron ore, which burns cleaner and it makes more iron. So I know I have that kind of coke there, but there's more than one type of coke. This is not cocaine related either. This is a byproduct of coal. Okay, and later on this will be used part of the Bessemer process to produce steel by Andrew Carnegie. So, spoiler. Okay, so up until this point, really, canals and rivers were the most efficient way to move items, but the railroad is going to be something that actually makes canals really obsolete. Okay, now there's some places you still need canals at, but for the most part, everything could now be done with a railroad. Okay, Richard Trevithick, okay, he designs and built the first steam-powered locomotive in 1804. Okay. And within about 45 years, there were 6,000 miles of track. Okay, and this is something that changes the entire world. The creation of the railroad and railroad track, it helps create stable trade routes and made it easier to move products to and from the markets. Okay, George Stephenson, he creates a faster engine called the rocket, and this could go up to 24 miles an hour. Okay. And really, that's faster than any horse can maintain. So this is just an innovation that really helps change the world. Manchester and Liverpool, these were new industrial towns. And Manchester by itself is going to grow from 20,000 people to 500,000 people over 100 years. Okay, and that may not sound like that big of a leap, but there were no towns 500,000 people large by 1850. It was almost unheard of. And in 1750, there were very few places on Earth where you had that many people in such a small location. So, Josiah Wedgwood. He starts to experiment in pottery and porcelain. If you look on the right-hand side up at the top, that's some of the things that he was able to create with the pottery and porcelain. And he creates a company that's known as Queenswear. And it has a lot of style and refinement. On a weird note, Josiah Wedgwood looks a lot like my cousin Craig, but a little bit dumber. That's not really a compliment for either one of them. But Queenswear still sells today, and if you have any, it's worth quite a bit of money. So, look for weird things in garage sales, and maybe you can make a lot of money off of it, especially if it's something that was made during the time he was in charge of the company. The Crystal Palace Expedition. This is the first World's Fair. And this is created by the British to show off British industry to the world in 1851. There were over 100,000 exhibits. They showcase all types of Indian products from the country of India. Britain produced in 1851 about half the world's coal, half the world's cotton, and half the world's manufacturing. Okay? So the tiny island's able to do all that by themselves, and they do it in part by intimidating some of the nations that they had made into colonies. So just to protect the intellectual ideas of the British, their artisans and machines could not leave Britain legally until 1842. So that's one of the ways that they protected the businesses that they had, was by keeping everything in country at that time. France was a much different story than England was, especially at the very beginning of this. They had small family-based agriculture without the impact of the Enclosure Acts. So there was no major attempt to consolidate the land and bring in people to make profits off of farming the land. The agricultural revolution doesn't hit them as early as it does the English. So the workforce is much smaller. They're still out on the countryside, and they still have a lot of skilled laborers in France, but they focus more on higher end products and on silks and really intricately patterned textiles. So they're making things, but they're not making it quite at the rate and speed of England. Okay, so these industrial cities are going to grow a lot slower in France. Okay, and it's not until after 1850 that they start to have a consolidated system of French finance, also the introduction of French railroads and communications. So once these things are introduced into France, then you'll see industrialization at a much faster rate, but they had a long way to go to catch up with the British, although they are pretty far ahead of most of the rest of the world, in the 1850s. We have now reached the end of today. I hope that you all feel a little bit better and you're a little bit happier. It's going to be a lovely semester this year, so everyone have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. By the way, don't COVID, don't cocaine, and don't AIDS.